Hello, thanks so much for tuning in. My name is Nicola Kemp, and I'm Editorial Director of Creativebrief, and we are so grateful to partner with the Gerety Awards for this UK jury discussion. The Gerety Awards are unique because they judge all advertising, not just advertising to women, through the female lens. I have four brilliant creative leaders with me today to unpack the trends and themes from this year's awards and share the learnings for brand leaders navigating our fast-moving, confusing, and jargon-fueled marketing landscape. So with me today, I have jury president Emma de la Fosse. She has a completely holistic view of creativity across the industry, as she's been chief creative officer at the full spectrum of creative agencies, from Ogilvy One to Ogilvy Group UK, Digitas and Edelman, which is not only unusual, but it makes her a perfect choice for jury president. And then with her driving in today, straight from a client meeting, which we so appreciate, is Tash Beecher, and she's Global and EMEA Creative Director at Syneos Health, with a passion for elevating the lesser told stories in the world, because she believes that everyone deserves to sparkle. She's creative co-director at the LGBTQ plus advertising group, Outvertising. And then Pansy Aung, she is creative director at Digitas. She is a practical dreamer, which is such a lovely description, with a proven track record in leading award-winning integrated campaigns from concept to production. And then last but not least, we have the brilliant Ruth Boulter. She is creative director at McCann London, and she is a multi-dimensional creative leader. She's also the driving force behind the incredible Nurofen See My Pain campaign, the gender equity campaign that has won tons of awards. And she's worked in some of the world's top agencies, both in New York and London. So thank you all for joining me, and thanks everyone for tuning in. So to kick off, our first theme for discussion is focused on bringing the joy back to earned media, from bringing brands to life in gaming to making washing machines dance. What creative inspiration can we all take from this year's Gerety Awards? So Emma, I'd love to start with you as jury president. What stood out for you this year judging the awards?
What stood out for me was that the work that sort of immediately connected to people, with people rather, was work that had humour in it. Maybe it's just because it immediately made us feel something, or whether humour is still sort of, in the minority of campaigns rather than the majority of campaigns. Maybe it's because over the past few years, a lot of the work has been kind of quite heavy, dealing with serious issues in serious ways. And actually, when a humorous campaign comes along, it's a breath of fresh air, it's some light relief. So certainly watching the reactions of all my fellow jurors around the table when something came along that made us laugh, it really sort of started to gain traction. And actually, we've seen that come through in some of the results on the shortlists. The other thing really was simplicity. Again, work that was just easy to understand, that was quick to sort of like get into our brains. Again, gained a lot of traction within the jury. Anything that was just too hard to work out, too complicated. Yeah, and I think maybe that's the thing these days, is that we just don't have that bandwidth. There's so much information coming at us all. We need simplicity, and we could do with a laugh. There you go.
Excellent start. I think 2025 has definitely been a year that's delivered a lot, but maybe not enough laughs. And Pansy, I'd love to bring you in here because Emma said something really powerful there in terms of simplicity. And this year, it definitely felt like there was a lot of integration with experience like gaming and brands really using earned media creatively. Do you think we are now at this point where we're moving away from a model of advertising based primarily on interruption?
Yeah, for sure. The word interruption should just be phased out of advertising end of, because why should brands be getting in the way of experiences people want to engage in and love? We should always just try and add value. I think that's always been the case, but even more so now, because people can't have the choice now to skip and bypass your content. So what we should always just do is make things that people want to get involved in or add value to the experience rather than the other way around. So actually, like saying gaming, make that experience better with our content, boom, like, or like earned, making something famous for collaborating with something they love, boom, it's not like, look, this is what we've done now, ta-da. It's, yeah, that kind of thinking is kind of out of date and doesn't work.
I definitely think we saw that with lots of the awards that we looked at. And with that in mind, Tash, I'd love to bring you in here because Pansy's really highlighted that we are finally shifting away from this model. And to Emma's point earlier, actually, sometimes adding that value and not interrupting is just giving a bit of light relief, a space for a laugh, and that is really important. What for you were the creative highlights of the awards, and what trends do you think brands should be aware of?
I mean, I think it's really interesting that the three things that I've thought of the trends from the work that we saw have been mentioned already. So it's it's humor, it's simplicity, but it's also a boldness in making connections with almost seemingly random topics. And I think on the humor, I've been saying it for a few years now, but obviously since the pandemic, when levity was much needed, that kind of use of appropriate and relatable humor. I think that's something that is, has remained strong in this year's awards. And I'm also a super strong advocate for simplicity. And so much of the work that inspired me drew on some kind of simple truth, which, amongst the sometimes complicated is really quite awesome and really welcome. And so I think seeing the humor and the simplicity merge together is something that I find particularly inspirational. But the boldness I think was the extra thing that inspires me. What's not to love about something that is in your face but draws upon some kind of simple insight. Yeah.
That's so interesting, Tash. And I'm so with you that sometimes simple insights are so underrated.
Mm.
With that boldness in mind, Ruth, I'd love to bring you in here because I know partly it's the economic climate that we're in, but partly it has been an ongoing industry focus, this notion of earned media and that being really, really appealing to brands. Are you seeing more creativity in its application?
I mean, yeah, definitely. I think we all know the power of earned media is about connecting with customers more effectively, building cultural relevance, and being in the places where they are, and kind of everything that Pansy was talking about. And I think as well as tech is changing, it's enabling us to kind of mess stuff up. I'm not going to swear. Mess with things and do things differently, and allow us to kind of play in spaces where our consumers are, but in ways, like everyone said, really, that are additive, that feel seamless. And I thought what was interesting in the work that we looked at was some did it really well and some did it really badly. And not going to name names. Maybe we should. I don't know. But I think particularly the gaming examples were really good. While I didn't feel like I saw anything new in the gaming sphere, I think a lot of us were like, oh, we've seen this before, but this is the conversation around it's maybe new. But I think where there was a lack of newness, there was definitely more joyful ideas than I've seen before. And I don't know about you guys, but I keep thinking about the Mountain Dew one, where they changed all of the
Yeah.
We were all like that, do 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 in the chat. And for anyone who hasn't seen it, like look it up. It's it was just like when we're talking about levity, it was just so much fun. And they took all the games, and instead of the kind of gun sounds or the the karate sounds, it was using different forms of the word Jew, which was really fabulous. So from that, I'm feeling like the place where creativity really can flourish is not necessarily in maybe the mechanics so much, but really in the way that you make something really entertaining and really memorable. And that's how you can get it to land most, and therefore get people to play into it and it feel really culturally relevant. So yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
That's so interesting as well, because as you were talking, I was thinking sometimes perhaps like as an industry, we want to do something new, but actually the gaming community in that space, like it's so rich that actually going back to it and really focusing on it and understanding the community from a brand perspective can be really, really powerful. And shifting the conversation slightly, because we know as Creative Equals always reminds us, who makes the work shapes the work. And there's no way to sugarcoat 2025 when it comes to equality in the creative industries. Research from major players shows that 120,000 women have left the creative industries in 2024. And with the Gerety Awards judging from the female lens, I'd really love to pick your brains on some less light-hearted topics, including burnout, maternity discrimination, and gendered ageism. And Tash, with that who makes the work shapes the work lens in mind, what should we be prioritizing as an industry to ensure that we move beyond creative tokenism?
That's a that's a really big question. I think for me it comes down to, as an industry, we need to think more like creatives, right? And by that I mean to get outside of ourselves, to go explore what's different than what we're used to, get comfortable with the uncomfortable, as the kind of saying goes. Don't just go to the predictable places, fish from different pools, hire more lesbians because, or more black women, or more neurodiverse women, not just because you want to fill a diversity quota, but because it makes business sense, right? Because actually, we know that diverse workplaces have 25% more profitability, which is a figure that I've pulled out of the advertising playbook. So little plug there for that. But I actually believe that that kind of profitability comes when we have people in our businesses that channel their differences to maximum impact. So the work is crafted better, the conversations we have to get to that work and to get that work made are more meaningful. Those rich lived experiences allow our businesses and creativity to flex and reform at pace. And so I think we need to prioritize having that business case at the top of our minds always, and protecting our people so that they can get to that as well. So yeah, I think, don't even think about it as tokenism, think about it as for the business case.
That business case is so interesting, especially when we're so focused on innovation and this notion that inclusion can really unlock growth and innovation potential. And Ruth, I'd love to bring you here because I know some of the work that you've done, like the Nurofen campaign, See My Pain, has really, really done that. And stereotypes really matter because they do still stop people from achieving their full potential. Are we still stereotyping motherhood as a creative full stop?
Well, good question, being a new mother myself and actually, thinking about this a lot. And I think I'm probably equally to blame. And I think about, the stereotypes of new mums and things. And I think when now I'm, thinking a lot about returning to work in a few months, and, how does that look and how do I fit within that as well? And I think I had this idea that, I'm going to be really stretched, and how am I going to do everything, and how am I going to, I'm just going to have to prioritize my baby, and and actually the closer I get, the hungrier I am to get back into this. And why I'm on this panel, why I wanted to do the jury and everything, I miss it, and I have this kind of newfound ambition and hunger, which is an energy which has really surprised me. And I think it's the, can you have it all? I think I wonder if it's maybe reframing it, you don't have to have it all right now. I think it's kind of this idea that women can and should have everything at the same time. It's, I think there's different chapters of your life, and you can, and where are you at that time? And I think what our industry really needs to make space for is that you don't fall off the planet when you have a kid. A creative person, CD, ECD, whoever is going to be an epic CD, whether they have a child or not. And, and I think how I'm feeling, you can come back really energized and amazingly creative. And how do we as an industry make space for that idea? And I think, there's also that idea of burnout that you talked about. I think, how do we've definitely got this badge of loving being busy, particularly in London, I think. And how do we also make space and time, something we were talking about during the awards, how do we make space and time to top up all of our worlds, whether that's, motherhood, or whether that's, Tash, like your triathlon, or all of the different things that we're doing as humans. How do we make time for these so that ultimately when we do come to work, we're much fuller, more rounded, more interesting people? So yeah, I think there's space for everything. I think we should ignore stereotypes and, forge. I think all of us here on this call are living proof of, ignoring stereotypes. I think, yeah, it's an amazing time to be a woman in this industry.
Such excellent points there. And I was also thinking as you were talking, Ruth, just what a brilliant thing it is to do a judging day on maternity leave. Like, that should be, Gerety do such a great job with that, but that should be such a thing that other awards shows can take and steal as a really great way of really getting that creative lens in the room. And Pansy, bringing you in here, and Ruth touched on it, because burnout is something that's very high on the industry agenda at the moment. How can we work together to create career paths in which women can achieve their full potential?
I mean, I 100% agree with Ruth. Like, it's a great time to be a female creative now, because there's a lot more acceptance on like flexible working and, just having kind of work-life balance as well. And what you just said about kind of like burnout is really close to my heart as well, because I've had it twice. Because, I was back in the days, I was trying to kind of work in a way that works for everyone else, like pretending like you have no commitments, you live and breathe it, you're always on, and like kind of like a Peter Pan as well. I always like, yeah, let's do it, let's hang out, let's just 24/7 advertising, kind of thing. But actually at the end it's not sustainable, and you lose talent because people love it but they can't keep up, and that's kind of, I was edging towards that. But actually now I think what's really great about the industry, and it's getting more and more kind of like, the norm now, is that people accept that you can have boundaries, and accept like that you can come up with a solution that is more sustainable for everyone, and that won't compromise your kind of commitment or your dedication to the work as well. It's just more like, accept that I'll be very focused now from 9 to 5, and then I can switch off because I've got other commitments or I've got other interests, and that's really good. It really helped. Like, kind of sometimes it's all in the head as well, right? Burnout is not about the hours, it's about the mindset, not thinking that, oh, I have to be always on, I have to be really dedicated, I can't be like this, I can't be like that. I think that kind of shackle has kind of been taken off now, and people are willing to listen to, okay, what are your needs? How is the best way for you to work, to make it work for you? Yeah, it's great progress.
Thank you for sharing that, Pansy. I think it's genuinely inspirational to hear that actually you can reframe, revisit, and sometimes a perceived compromise can in fact be a place of creative growth, which is really inspiring. And Emma, I'd love to bring you in here, because in the era of AI, we need women's wisdom more than ever. Do we need to have a more creative approach to career building? And what could that look like?
I think, I don't know about a creative approach to career building with AI, but I certainly think that how our careers are going to evolve over the next few years with AI, the creative community needs to have a narrative about that, because if we don't, if there's a vacuum, somebody else is going to fill it. And those people will be talking about efficiencies, and they'll be talking about money, and they'll be talking about automation and all that. And as a creative person, the way I look at AI is to say, actually, ideas that were previously impossible are now possible. And actually that will now allow creatives to make more work, more ideas, where perhaps budgets in the past wouldn't allow us to do something, or time wouldn't allow us to do something, or sheer technology wouldn't allow us to do something. Actually now AI will enable us to do it. And I think that's the thing. So there's kind of like, I want the conversation around AI and creativity to be really positive and to be additive, rather than, oh my goodness me, AI is going to start coming up with all the ideas. Frankly, yes, it will do that in some cases, but that is going to lead to the commoditization of creativity, and you're going to get a lot of bland stuff. So I think the future for really talented creatives who come up with fresh, original thinking is actually very bright, but we've got to grab AI with both hands. It's like when, I'm sort of like, I've been around in the industry long enough to remember when the internet was a thing back in the day, many, many decades ago now. But there was a real kind of parting of ways between some of the people who went, no, I don't like it, nothing to do with me, don't want to do that. And people that went, actually, this is a whole new toy box. I can make shit, I can do X, Y, Z. Oh my goodness me, digital product design, all that sort of thing. And I think we're at a similar kind of point in the road now. So I would just say to everybody working in the creative community, regardless of what your role is, grab it, people, grab this with both hands and let's make it ours. Let's not allow some very uncreative people to own this conversation and to drive it in a certain way. Let's go. So if you want to see, I think, a great piece of work, sadly, I didn't come across it in the Gerety Awards. I hope you won't mind me mentioning it, but recently RGA did a fantastic piece of work with Diageo called Abandoned Nights, and it was actually about abandoned shopping carts on this e-commerce site where you could buy bottles of tequila and stuff like that. And I think that's a wonderful example. If you haven't seen it, go find it. It's called Abandoned Nights. And it's about hyper-personalized creativity at scale. They made each individual person who'd abandoned their car a special animated film targeted. It was so funny. It was so brilliant. That's AI. You wouldn't have been able to do that before. So that's just a little example about AI can make impossible ideas possible.
That's such a great reminder. And I think also through the lens of the Gerety Awards, it's important to remember that there's already like a huge gap between how much time men are spending on AI tools versus women, and also a significant gap. Like I think 12% of AI researchers are women, 80% of AI academics are men. So there's a lot of work to be done there as well. And shifting the conversation slightly, because there was a lot of challenger brands and challenger approaches in the Gerety, and definitely more for AI. It's really interesting. I remember last awards season, there was a conversation around where is the AI, and this time round, maybe sometimes it's retrofit, like what did the AI do? Are you sharing your internal marketing wheel with your CRM system and saying that that's a really great use of AI? So I'd love to sort of talk about that future of data-driven creativity, because Pansy, I'd love to get your view. Are we seeing a redefinition of what it means to be a challenger brand in marketing today? And what does that shift mean for brands and creativity?
I mean, you were talking about AI and data. I think it is, in a way, AI and data are kind of just like trends as well. And challenger brands are just ones who are able to kind of like tap at it at pace. I mean, the brands don't have to be small. I'm loving what Currys are doing right now, right? They're big, but they're able to kind of just go for it and not be kind of hindered by rounds of like, oh, is this like on brand? Is this like rounds of like approval process? And they just jump on it. I think that's kind of what we mean now with challenger brand, is just being a bit more risk averse and having that mentality regardless of the size of the company.
I think that's such an important point, Pansy, and I love that you've raised it, because that's definitely so interesting when you see brands actually successfully act like a challenger brand with the scale of Currys.
Yeah, because actually like data in itself is a trend. So people always like try to like differentiate it. We're seeing this data, but it's like, that's a trend. Trend is culturally relevant, and jump on it. And sometimes it might be like hard numeric kind of like data, or it might be observation, but kind of turns into stats and data. So I think, yeah, we should not see them as separate.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. And Ruth, I'd love to bring you in here, because it's interesting, because I'll often speak to CMOs who have more data than they know what to do with, and that's almost become another issue. But is there a danger that many brands are applying data to creativity in the same way? And then from a consumer perspective, is the danger that we just see a sea of sameness?
Yeah, and I think this is something also we talked about during the judging, wasn't it? I think I was like, are wanting so much more from particularly the innovation category. I think if you want to win a Gerety Award, get into that category, because it was, that's where there was most opportunity, because I think everything felt very samey. People were using AI particularly a lot around search, and how do you make the kind of customer journey more seamless, and how do you get the stack to talk to each other really well. And it felt like stuff we've is brilliant and important, but it felt like things that we've possibly seen before. So I think the creative opportunity is, how do you like you were saying, Emma, the RJ example, how do we just do fun, weird, how do we use AI to like really mess with stuff and do it differently, and really explore the potential here. And I mean, I think that's part of it. How do we do it differently? But I mean, I think I agree with you, Emma. I don't think it's something to fear. I think it's like, I mean, certainly how we've been using it is creatively, is how do you cut the corners on all the boring stuff as well, to like, and therefore you can focus your creativity on jumping off from that, so you're not having to wade through data. You can get kind of like results and answers and things very, very quickly. And also, how do you sometimes with more challenging clients as well, who really want to see stuff before they'll make it, like AI is a brilliant tool, because you can put a celebrity in that storyboard, or you can make things very, very real for them very quickly. So I agree. I think it's a really exciting moment, and it's ours to own this conversation. Absolutely.
And Tash, I'd love to bring you in here to build on Ruth's point there, because it was definitely very elastic, like the use of AI in the awards, spanning everything from that single customer view to AI being a fourth judge in a boxing match for Ring. Do you think that we're going to see more creative uses of AI, and is that going to be something that actually we see a shift towards a more positive and a more kind of optimistic creative outlook?
Yeah, I think so. I think we're going to maybe see the output of how we're using AI in development, because I think one of the key things for me that I'm seeing in the working of my teams is that AI is allowing us to fail faster. And I think that the outputs of failing faster, there's a myriad of outputs for that. And so I think whether you're a kind of smaller brand or a massive brand, it feels like actually that ability to fail faster was what is allowing brands to legitimately rub shoulders with each other, when previously maybe they might not even have been in the same category. And that placing different kinds of brands and companies next to each other using AI, I think is quite interesting. I think interestingly, I think the smaller businesses and brands are able to lean into AI in the development process a lot easier potentially, since they're a bit more, I don't know, unencumbered, let's say, from that sometimes very bloated process. Since they're a bit more, yeah, that I don't know, the bigger organizations, let's say, are having to navigate that a little bit more, and potentially feeling the pressure to pivot away as a cost savings exercise. And so I think we saw the outputs of all of this in the awards. The creativity seen in some of the kind of smaller brands was actually at the same level because of AI, and it was a joy to see. And I think what's interesting as well about the use of AI is that, and I could be totally wrong, but I suspect that there was a couple of ideas in the mix that I could totally imagine, the starting point of which, and how it would have been pitched, and how I'm not sure if it was pitched to me, I would have gone for it. And I think that AI helped to create faster iterations as part of that creative process to help simplify some of these maybe quite complicated ideas that I can imagine being pitched to and not going for. And they ended up being very, very strong. And so, yeah, I think we're going to see more of that output, more of the kind of, things that we can have fun and play around with being made into something quite meaningful and, super strong.
That's so interesting, Tash, as well. And it's making me think about how we use AI, like as organizations, to like existing processes versus
Yeah,
actually breaking those processes, like, and
exactly.
being the bigger opportunity. That's so interesting. And Emma, I'd like to bring you in here because we also saw quite a lot of utility uses of AI tech and creativity, whether it was Playbury, which a library in Singapore turned library books into games, the app that we saw to promote digital privacy. Do you think brands are doing better in kind of using AI to really, really challenge category norms and do things a bit differently?
Yes and no. Some are, some aren't. I think it's patchy. I mean, it's so early days,
Yeah.
really. I think brands are using AI for all sorts of different things. I mean, one of the interesting, again, so I was quite interested in some work I saw recently about how AI is being used to kind of like challenge stereotypes and stuff within categories. So, for example, there was some. It's how AI was making something possible, which I don't know 2 or 3 years ago would not have been possible. So to try and sort of thwart search engines that are throwing up kind of pictures of,
Mm,
realistic, modelly looking women, when you put in woman into a search engine, for example. So we've seen lots of brands try and do stuff to kind of like alter that algorithm. So Dove did a campaign, etc. But I saw some work recently which used the algorithm or used AI to thwart the algorithm. So AI made so many different pictures of so many different kinds of women and just flooded the internet with
mm,
them. So literally, it's just, because obviously, search and algorithms work on, sort of like probabilities and that sort of thing. So the chances of you coming up with a more realistic looking woman were that much higher because the AI was creating so many more pictures. Now, to try and get a team of humans to do that, it would have just been absolutely impossible. But because it was given to AI to do it, it could come up with sort of like 2 million more pictures and images just like that. And it just, again, so I've seen people try to do this idea over the past, I don't know, 10 years or so to try and, infiltrate picture libraries with lots and lots of images. But we've been kind of hampered by our own bandwidth in a way. We've only got so many hours in a day and pairs of hands. But AI came in and actually did it. So I love the sort of almost like the irony of
mm.
AI being used against AI. It was quite,
Yeah.
quite elegant. But yeah.
And I love how you answered that question with a yes and no, because I think that really reflected the culture that you created within the judging day. I think I've been lucky enough to judge lots of different awards, but I've never really been in a space where people were so open to changing their minds, which I think is really, really interesting from a creative perspective, particularly in such a kind of polarizing environment, and that real power of seeing the lens through a world, through seeing the work through a lens other than your own as well. So, with that in mind, I'd love you to just leave the audience with a takeaway, and I'm going to start with you, Pansy, because sometimes I think it's really challenging, particularly with new technology like AI, to think that you have to rush to an answer when actually we just need to ask some better questions. So, with that in mind, what one question do you think creative and marketing leaders should be asking themselves today?
Like we've kind of seen in our kind of the works that we've seen, like earn seems to be quite prominent and like kind of like a winning factor in doing a successful campaign. So one thing I think we should start considering is, I know AI can help us make more effective work, and also, it's about cost efficient. We've got so many formats to do, every single campaign. But should fame be considered in every aspect of our work to ensure stand out in a crowded space? Because so that we're not just doing generic work, but work that actually is worth doing.
That's an excellent question. Thank you, Pansy. And Ruth, what would your question be? Oh, you're on mute.
classic. How do you present professionally on a meeting? No. I think, I think increasingly living in these very conservative times that are clearly very dangerous times in that regard, how do we ensure that as a creative community we're continuing to push and be confident and to, drive change and drive excitement and mess with things, I think is my question, not to kind of sit back and be quiet.
That's an excellent question. Thank you, Ruth. And Tash, what would your question be?
There's a couple of questions that come to mind, and I keep flitting between the two, but I think the one that I'm gonna land on, obviously, you always need to be catering to your audience, or or the brand or the product message that's been crafted to get to it. But when it comes to a jury of your peers, I think people should be asking about their human legacy and, think about it in terms of whatever book of advertising that gets written and read in 100 years' time is the every piece of work that you're doing. Think about it as a chapter of iconic awesomeness, or is it going to be a footnote in the section that the world wishes it could sweep under the carpet? So think, question your human legacy and what it means for in the next 100 years, which is a pretty big thing to be thinking about.
I love that, Tash. I feel like it would be hard to create 4 out of 10 work if you were asking that question consistently. That's really good. Thank you. And last but not least, our wonderful jury president, Emma, what would be your question?
I'm just writing down everybody else's answers. It's so inspiring. And actually, I'm thinking, right, I'm going to use these when I have a look at some campaigns and stuff in Creative Whip meetings later on today. I'm going to be looking at fame, boldness, what's the human legacy? I guess in these sort of like times of, we talk a lot about, again, AI, automation, efficiency. We're also squeezed and stuff like that. But I guess something that stood out for me a lot when we were all judging together was the work that connected with people, was the work that made us feel something. And I would just ask, does your work make people feel something? Because it kind of doesn't matter how you get there. It doesn't matter if you get there with AI. It doesn't matter if you get there by using data to produce an insight, or it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how you get there. It doesn't matter if you sit there with a bit of paper and a pen. But does the idea actually make you feel something? Because, like it or not, that's what will stay with us. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we are in a commercial business. And I think that the work that connects with us on an emotional level, and I don't mean sadness or, as in makes us laugh or makes us surprised or whatever, that's the work that's going to stay with us. That's the work that's going to stay in our heads as well as our hearts. And I think that's the work that will be most effective. So it's the feels for me.
Brilliant.
You're thinking about the washing machines.
Definitely, Ruth. Definitely. We haven't talked enough about the washing machine.
We have not.
We will link the washing machine work, brilliant campaign from VML Mexico, which involved really old washing machines dancing to personalized tracks with personalized discounts. So we will share the link to the work within the write-up of this conversation. Thank you all so much for bringing the energy from all different parts of the UK today. And also thank you to everyone for tuning in. I think we've covered a lot of ground, but that creative simplicity and actually making people feel something and finding the space within our very busy working lives to be inspired by brilliant creative people like you and the wonderful work that we saw in the Gerety Awards. So thank you so much to everyone for joining the panel, and thank you everyone for tuning in as well. Thank you so much.